Hello again. So last time on Fated Mates of the Drakoan, Davin had just smelled his mate. So let's see what happens next. Hi, my name's Danielle Forrest, and on this channel I do videos about myself, my writing, and anything related to those topics. So in today's video, we are reading episode 4, which is The World Has Changed Forever. Let's get started. A few hours earlier. "Don't do this, Jess. It's not safe out there," her roommate and best friend Scotty said, wringing his hands from the doorway to her room. She turned to him with a sigh. "Not now, Scotty." He was wearing one of his favorite Star Trek t-shirts and a pair of jeans that now had mud stains on the knees from working in Inez's garden. Before everything had gone dark, not a single one of them would have even thought of invading her garden. That was her space, her sanctuary, and they'd all respected that. They all had their own passions and projects, their own interests, and that was what made their household, filled with 6 young adults all starting out their respective careers, work. But now, worry left everyone feeling the need to do something. And with no power, no work, and a cloud of paranoia and fear hovering over them, they sometimes ended up invading each other's private spaces and boundaries. She wished she could say that she was the exception, but she'd also offered to help in the garden more than a couple times since everything went haywire. Just the fact that she was even contemplating this course of action probably said a lot. She didn't necessarily want to leave, but it was starting to become claustrophobic, and she was starting to worry about their supplies. No, that was a lie. She'd been worrying about their supplies for a while now. 6 adults could plow through some food pretty quickly, and the first thing to go in the stores had been this food. It had all started when the government had announced the alien siege. The government had told people not to panic, to stay in their homes as much as possible. A state of emergency had been declared. People should have stayed home, chewing on their nails as they obsessively watched the broadcasts, waiting on news of their own salvation or destruction. Instead, Americans being Americans, they'd felt compelled to do something, even when there was nothing to do. The next thing you knew, the shelves were empty and you saw people rolling shopping carts away from the grocery stores with more food than any one family could use in a lifetime. It was wasteful and left most people going without, but that didn't stop people from doing it anyway. She and her roommates had spent that time inventorying their supplies, figuring out what would keep and what should be eaten first. Fortunately, they'd always kept a decent amount of canned goods on hand because, again, 6 young adults could wipe out a pantry at lightning speed. They'd figured they were good, that they could handle whatever came next so long as no one binged. Then the power went out. At first, they'd still thought everything would be fine. The recent communal panic had already put them in a good place for a power outage. Supplies were inventoried, flashlights, lighters, and candles were set out in each room, and the weather was temperate enough lately that they didn't have to worry about heat or cold. Jess remembered calling out to each of her roommates, checking that everyone was okay. They'd all met in the living room. Scotty had complained about his game cutting out and losing his progress, while Melissa had made a joke about having a slumber party. Tom, ever thoughtful, slow to speak Tom, had cut the joke abruptly short when he'd said, "The phones don't work." He'd been holding his cell phone in his hand, looking down at it with a frown on his face. "What do you mean?" Inez had said, reaching up to the little cross necklace she'd received at her confirmation. Tom had looked up and lifted his phone so all of them could see. The screen had been dark. "It won't power on." And cell phones run on batteries. Melissa had scoffed, flipping her hair off her shoulder as she spoke. "You probably just forgot to charge it." "Then try yours," he'd said. Jess and the other 4 roommates had then each pulled out their phones. Hers, Melissa's, and Scotty's had been in their pockets. Amanda's had been in the kitchen, while Inez had left hers in her room. But within moments, they'd all been back, all staring down at their phones. All the screens had been dark. Jess remembered mashing the power button over and over again. She remembered pushing the force reset combination until her fingers hurt. It didn't make a difference. All the phones were dead. How is this possible? What does this mean? Inez had asked, a slight quiver in her voice. It was what they all had been thinking, what they all had been wondering, and no one truly had an answer. Surely the government would say something, Melissa had said, her usual confidence and snark suddenly absent. What if they can't? Tom had replied. That was the thought that had been ringing through Jess's brain ever since that conversation. What if they can't? That thought had kept her from leaving the house. It was terrifying, paralyzing, and a part of her hadn't been ready to know yet. Still wasn't ready to know. She wanted to stay put, as the government had said. Stay in your homes. She wanted to pretend that this was all normal, that sometime soon they would get the power back up, or that someone would start going through the neighborhoods with a bullhorn, telling them everything would be fine, giving them instructions on what to do next. God, how she wished someone would tell her what to do. And maybe that was part of the reason she was doing this thing that Scotty was begging her not to do. Maybe she just wanted someone to save her from the unknown. She looked over at Scotty, where he was still wringing his hands. His eyes beseeched her, begging her to stay. I have to do this. You don't. We'll be fine. Jess gave him a dirty look. We won't be fine. You know as well as I do. We're burning through food fast, and if there's no power, I doubt we'll have clean running water for much longer. We need answers or we need supplies. We have supplies, canned goods, the garden. She paused, letting him absorb the seriousness of their situation. We both know how long that's going to last. The garden will only produce for so long, and the canned goods will be gone long before that. Inez's garden was never intended to feed us all, and it won't get us through the winter. We're nowhere near winter. This will be solved before then. Will it? Seriously? Don't you know your history? Blackouts don't last this long. And they don't affect cell phones. She flung her hands out to the sides. We're already in uncharted territory here. We have no idea what's going to happen. We can't count on anything, not without information. We have no information. You think you can learn something? Jess shook her head and shrugged. I don't know. It's a long walk to the capital, but doable in a day. I've got my bow, a knife, and enough martial arts training that I can probably defend myself. I'll be fine. I'd rather try and fail than do nothing, though. He fidgeted in place, thinking for several moments before finally giving in and saying, Maybe you should bring some camping gear, just in case. No. If I have to be gone that long, I'll just stay awake. I don't know enough about what's going on to risk sleeping in the open. Scotty's hand-wringing grew more agitated. Maybe I should go with you. Jess smiled, making an effort not to laugh. No offense, Scotty, but you're probably the last person I'd want having my back in a fight. He pouted, practically confirming her point. He wasn't a small man necessarily, but he was more than likely to exercise to look like a Klingon than to learn self-defense. I'll be fine, she said, trying to reassure him. But you'll be leaving the neighborhood. There's no telling what it's like out there. I know, and I can always turn back. I'll be fine. He looked down, then away, showing his defeat without words. Jess's chest tightened a little, a compassion for her friend tying her in knots, but no matter how much she wanted to indulge him, they couldn't keep going like this. She turned her back, shifting her focus to the things she'd collected on her bed. Hydration backpack, plastic trash bags, a meal bar, a hunting knife, a quiver, her recurved bow, and a dozen arrows her father had bought her years ago. They were wicked sharp, and she shuddered even looking at them. He'd bought them hoping to take her hunting with him someday. but she'd always stalled him, saying she wasn't good enough yet. In reality, she'd been afraid, but also sympathetic. Most wild animals nowadays had to struggle to even find somewhere to live, let alone thrive. What right did she have to take that away from them when she could just buy food at the grocery store instead? She quickly loaded her pack, slinging it on her back, then hesitated, her hands shaking a little when she reached for the arrows. She deviated, grabbing the knife instead, something she figured she probably wouldn't even have cause to use. It clipped securely at her waist, the sheathed blade pressing firmly against her outer thigh. Next was the quiver, the arrows, the moment of truth. Why am I being so dramatic? After all, what was the worst thing that could happen? She could chicken out, or fail to find anything to hunt. She could miss. I could actually kill something, and just curl up into a ball, bawling all over its small, bloody corpse. Yeah, that was probably likely. But hunting wasn't the only reason she was leaving the house. She couldn't forget that. They needed answers as much as they needed food right now. If they knew what was going on, how long they had to hold out, it would make a difference. They would know how to portion their meals. They would know if they needed to ration even further. No one had expected this to go on as long as it already had. Her stomach churned with anxiety as she fisted the shafts of the arrows and slid them into the quiver. It was a cheap thing, something that was good enough for practicing in the backyard, but that wasn't really designed for travel. It clipped at her waist, dangling precariously. She shook her head at the terrible design. All the arrows would probably spill out onto the ground if she so much as leaned forward. In the past, it would have been fine. Today, she could feel its inadequacy. Jess paused for a moment, staring at the last thing on the bed, her bow. There was something about it sitting there all alone, like it was an exclamation point on a sentence or maybe an accusation. It was a stark against the plain blue comforter, its pale wood standing out in perfect contrast. She felt almost like the people in the movies in those scenes right before the action starts. She could practically hear the music egging her on. She reached for the bow, a sick feeling twisting in her gut. Her hand pressed down on the riser, holding there for a moment. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then slowly curled her fingers around the smooth wood. Letting her anxiety settle, she slowly let out the breath, opening her eyes, and turned. Scotty was still there, now chewing his lip as well as wringing his hands. Poor guy. She took a deep breath and shook her head, then walked past him and out of her room, quickly jogging down the steps to the front door. No one else confronted her, and she could just barely hear voices coming from the backyard, where they were likely helping Inez with the garden. It was a comforting sound, something that almost made her forget that the world was ending. How could anything bad be happening when her friends were joking around out back? But when she reached for the door handle, the cold bulb of metal pressing against her palm, one final moment of fear and doubt settled in. What if it's dangerous out there? She had no idea what had happened after everything died. They'd talked amongst themselves and later talked with their neighbors out front, but it was all speculation. Nobody had any news, not even Tom, and he worked for a congresswoman. Not anymore. The anxiety in her stomach amplified. None of them were working anymore. And what if the government's gone? What if there's anarchy out there? She imagined a Mad Max-style post-apocalyptic landscape and shuddered. That's not what's happening here, she said, trying to reassure herself. But what if the aliens had invaded? That gave her pause. She hadn't heard that much about the aliens before the lights had gone out, only that a fleet of ships had amassed around their orbit, and that the human forces were going to meet it and drive it back. But what if they'd lost? What if humans aren't in control anymore? All right, that's all for episode 4. Thank you for listening, and if you want to engage with my content more, you can find links to connect with me, connect with my content in the description of the video. As always, you can read up about 5 episodes ahead on my Ream subscription by joining the serial lover tier or higher. Additionally, these episodes are available on various free sites, including Wattpad, Inkit, and Dream. And let me know, what do you think is going to happen next? What do you think Jess is going to find out there in the real world? Have aliens invaded? Other than, of course, the Drakoans. Um, is there energy out there? We have seen a little bit of what's going on based upon what the Dracoans have seen so far, but what is she gonna find? Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do all that fun stuff. If you want to get notifications, hit the bell. And you will find some cards on the screen for more content to see from me. Until next time, bye!